Andy Milenius, our CTO, who's going to give us a peek into everything that is fulfilling our hopes and dreams that we've been working on, and well as Jocelyn Chang, who's just joined us in Singapore as our new community lead there.
Hello.
Hey.
All right, Jess, you want to tell us a bit about some of the stuff that's coming up in your world? Looks like Blockchain Week in San Francisco, the blockchain conferences that never end. Maybe recap of that.
Yeah, so is all a part of the blockchain conferences that never end. We're going to be beginning with ETH San Francisco on October 5th to the 7th, and Vitalik is actually going to be speaking along with Andy, who will be and doing some things there. And along with that SF Blockchain Week, we're going to be announcing another cool Dappy hour in which we use those physical tokens once again to spin Dai for drinks in a bar-like setting. And then we'll be watching Martin Lundfall speak at the Crypto Economic Security Conference that's being put on by Blockchain at Berkeley a little bit later in the week there.
Awesome. Just one question for you. Who came up with the name Dappy Hour?
I came up with it in a blog post at one point when I was sending it over to ETH Berlin, and nice. You also came up with such a genius idea.
Yeah, so geniuses in concert working together to come up with crypto-related puns. I'm so proud of that. All right, so let's talk about some technical milestones that have happened recently in the MakerDAO universe. A lot of big ones, so many big ones, it's almost hard to pick which one we should focus on. The foundation, our first decentralized governance vote has been completed. The result was almost suspiciously overwhelmingly positive. 99.86% of voters supported the 5 core principles for the MakerDAO Foundation, which is a great show of support. Got a lot of interaction with the tool. It was the first chance for Maker to present a sort of a fully fleshed out DApp for the community, and it was very exciting. So that's hardware support, real UX, UI experience, explanations about what you're supposed to do with the tool, which is handy, and it was well received. We have more iterations in the pipeline. I know that Soren's team is furiously at work making the voting tool version 2 for us. So there's exciting things to come in the future. We've partnered with Request Network once again to facilitate the donation or the acceptance of donations in Dai for various charitable organizations, which is pretty exciting. One of the many use cases for a stablecoin, obviously the reduction of volatility, and where does that make sense? Donations, I think, is a huge one. If you donate $200 in ETH and a month later it's worth $100 in ETH, it's not a great feeling. So stablecoins are a great opportunity for us there, and Request has stepped up to help us out with that again. So that's a great partnership. Along the same lines, we've just announced that we're going to do 5K in donation matching for the Hurricane Relief Fund. There's information on the subreddit. So if you guys want to boost in there and drop 5 or 10 Dai in the pot, MakerDAO will match that up to 5K. So it's a good opportunity for us to show everybody what crypto is capable of. This will actually do some good with our stablecoins instead of sitting around watching our stacks slowly deplete over time because of Ethereum. The marketing site has launched. Everybody have a look at that. Let us know what your feedback is. If you find any dead links or anything you want improved, we'd love to hear about it. And the final thing that I wanted to talk about, but I'm not going to say much, and this is so big that I can't even wrap my head around it. I'm going to let Andy wrap his head around it, and ours as well. The Multi-Collateral Dai code base was released to Kovan, and that has all kinds of implications about the future and what MakerDAO is up to. We'll let Andy dig into that once we get to our special guest spots. I think that's probably it for me for technical milestones and online type events. If anybody has any questions, as always, feel free to jump in. or just start typing them in the chat window, and then Jess or I will spot them and read them out for you. I think I'm trying to figure out what format we should go. I think, Jocelyn, why don't you kick us off first, and we'll talk a bit about what's happening in the Asia Pacific region, and then Andy will dig into some of your.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm actually Jocelyn. I'm the new APAC community lead, and sitting in Singapore office. So my role is to actually evangelize MakerDAO and also Dai in Southeast Asia. So there've been a lot of activities happening in the surrounding region in Vietnam, Thailand, Philippines, and Indonesia, and obviously Singapore being the blockchain hub in Southeast Asia. So I'm really psyched to be part of the team to make a difference in the blockchain world. Thanks for having me. And so I also plan like community building activities, reaching out to new users and scouting for potential business partners within Southeast Asia. So targeting trade finance companies and supply chain companies, as Rune actually preached, when he came to Singapore. So he actually came to Singapore with Torben about a week ago. Stayed here for 3 days along with the Danish fintech delegation from Copenhagen. So there was the Minister of Industry and Business and the CEO of Copenhagen Fintech. So I was actually, fixing up meetings for Rune to meet up with the local exchanges here, be it crypto to crypto, crypto fiat, providing fiat on off ramps for Dai. So really, so things are going great here. And then we also met with, some of our existing partner, like DJX. So DJX is going to be one of the, collateral partner when Multi-Collateral Dai is actually released in November. So we met with the co-founder from DJX as well. And Rune actually spoke at 2 different events. One of them is actually the FinTech workshop, where they try to bridge Copenhagen FinTech companies with Singapore FinTech companies. So they were about 150 to 200 participants, from the financial institutions, from the IT companies, and and we actually met with a lot of industry leaders that can provide us context from the supply chain and trade finance industry. So it was really great. And Rune also presented Dai to a group of NUS National University of Singapore. So he presented to a group of academic researchers and professors when he was here. And we are currently exploring different collaboration that we can work with all these with NUS actually. And I'm actually I was super excited, to have the opportunity to attend the reception as well at the Danish ambassador residence. And Rune and Torben was there. We met a couple of shipping giants, for example, Maersk Line Shipping, that we can potentially actually work with together. And I think that's pretty much about what I need to update when for the trip when Rune was here.
Wow, that's amazing. So you've been working for Maker for 2 weeks now. So it sounds like you hit the ground running. That's pretty incredible. What was the reception like at the NUS conference? Was there a lot of questions and asked? Did you feel like people understood the concept of the stablecoin or were interested?
So see, the thing is, the target audience was mainly professors from the School of Computing and and researchers that works in the School of Computing. So they don't really quite grasp the concept of make Dai. So I guess that will my job is to really simplify the entire concept to them, and follow up with them after the meeting itself. So I've been sending out emails and trying to just catch up with them maybe outside after the meeting.
Yeah, it sounds like it'll take a bit of work. And
Yeah.
you said you met with a few exchanges, and I'm not going to ask you what
Yeah.
they were or who they were, but the general interest, was it on ramps and off ramps, or were they interested in DAI as a trading pair? What was their primary interest?
So they're interested in actually listing DAI, and I mean, like, as and also launching, like, a DAI as a trading base pair. So yeah, I mean, like, they've heard about MakerDAO very much, like, because I spoke to like some of the researchers, and they're like, hey, how have MakerDAO been doing? Like, I haven't really heard from them, because one of them actually invested in MakerCoin like about 2-3 years back, and I think they're really very excited to have, like, us. I mean, like, the Asia presence, other than me and Chao, from China,
Yeah, it's amazing. It sounds like you guys have your work cut out for you. You have to onboard that entire hemisphere, so I'm sure you have a lot of work to do. All right, well, thanks for the update. That was amazing. Hopefully we'll be hearing more from you in the future.
No worries.
Great, thanks.
Yep.
All right, Andy, you're in the hot seat. So maybe this is the first time that you've been on a community call. That seems like an oversight on our part.
I don't know about all that. I was on the first Maker community call ever back in 2015.
Yeah, are you pulling rank on us now? All right, I get it. The first YouTube community call has that.
Yeah.
All right. So introduce yourself maybe and tell us what you do at Maker and why you're an OG, I guess.
My name is Andy Milenius. Like I said, I was on the first community call ever back in 2015. I just got really into Ethereum back then. And back then, there weren't very many projects. And the only one that was really interesting to me was Maker. And so I started to just contribute, because back then it was much more of like an open source project, in the sense that it was just like, there was no organization. You could just come and contribute and stuff. It was less formal, I guess you could say. And so I saw the project like grow up around me, right? And in general, I've always accepted like responsibility and leadership when the situation calls for it. And so I sort of like stepped up when there wasn't really much leadership, like a few years ago, and basically became the CTO. And so I've been working on like the strategic direction, and also the organization itself, like the organizational development, and then lastly, like representing the project externally for people. You've probably seen, people on the call may have seen some of my presentations. So I'm kind of the unofficial Maker spokesman, and do lots of presentations and go on the road and sort of explain the system to people. And so
one of your talks that got me partially into Maker in the first place a while ago. So
nice.
I'll blame you for anything if it doesn't work out.
Please assign all comment cards to my inbox.
Well, that's part of the job of a CTO, I guess, is ultimately be responsible for all the problems. So there you go.
Yeah, it's been a lot of work, but we're sort of entering a new chapter right now, right? And so momentum is picking up a lot, and so it's becoming it's moving really fast and becoming a lot easier to sort of do stuff, which is cool.
Well, that's interesting. I wouldn't have expected, well, maybe I would have expected that. So you feel that we are gaining momentum as an organization as we get closer to launches?
Yeah, a lot of momentum. It's really crazy. Like for instance, Jocelyn just coming on and hitting the ground running and just started doing a lot of stuff. This is like very typical, right? And it's becoming to the point where I can barely keep up. Like all the people that are joining and contributing, and like more and more people, and then people talk to their friends about how cool it is, and then they come and join. I just got done interviewing somebody right a second ago. It's a lot of activity.
That's one of the things that we were talking about in East Berlin. We had this impromptu sit down with other community managers, and people were talking about the problems that they had with managing community. And my problem was that we have too much happening. We release too often. There's too many cool things, and it's kind of creating this sense of exhaustion. It's hard for people to keep up. And none of the other community managers knew what I was talking about. So it's a nice problem to have, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so let's talk a bit about Multi-Collateral Dai then. this is fairly big, and so we pushed it to the testnet. So that's a major milestone. We obviously have a lot of work ahead of us, but maybe you can give us a little recap of where we're at, where that leaves us.
So we launched single collateral Dai back in December of last year, and that was really good. It was very instructive in terms of like what works and what doesn't, and especially like about system design and sort of like, I don't know, invariance and things like this, and guarantees and stuff. Because at the end of the day, Maker is very much a governed system, right? It's governed by the Maker holders. So early on in the history of Maker, there was like this reflexive sort of drive to lock ourselves out of the system, which is incredibly important when you think about like making credible promises to people, right? But that doesn't change the fact that the MKR holders choose things like the price fees. They choose things like the different types of collateral. They can basically, you know, control. They have a lot of levers to control the system, right? And so the system was created, or the system was always conceived of in this sort of like Bitcoin, sort of like hard immutability sort of way, you know. But what that led to was actually just kind of like a clunky, brittle design, and it was part of what was a headache about single collateral Dai up to this point, you know. And so because at the end of the day, the MKR holders are sort of like responsible for the system, you know, as a DAO, we sort of like went back to the drawing board and made another version of the system that basically acknowledged that and then used it to its advantage, right? And so what we wound up with was, so starting in February of this year, we went back to the drawing board and basically reapproached it with a sense of like modularity. And so the idea was, what we wanted to make the system with formal verification as like a primary goal, basically, right? In terms of creating a set of rules and then sticking to them, right? But this idea of like immutability or like locking themselves out of the system, that's actually like a separate sort of concept, right? What we were more interested in is these are all of the rules and this is exactly how they work, versus like, you know, the Maker holders can't try any funny business, because at the end of the day, they can do whatever funny business they want. So, and it's like what we rely on is we rely on their incentives as business people to not try that funny business. You know what I mean?
That's an interesting point. I think that it's something that's come up in the governance meetings a few times in various chat or communication channels, where some people have this impulse to hope that an algorithm will save us. If we find the perfect algorithm, nobody can break it, and then we'll just sit back and watch Dai operate. And my response to that is that even if that was conceivably possible, it would take us 1,000 years to figure it out, and human nature would outsmart us in the end anyways. And that's kind of why we have governance. It's because we have an algorithm that helps us as much as possible, and then we have humans working in concert, finding consensus, and then solving those problems. So,
right.
You guys
and
are
so basically, we went back to the drawing board with this sort of design principle in mind, and what we wound up with was something that was much more amenable to formal verification, and more modular and sort of more flexible in general, right? And so from February until about probably June, it was about like prototyping and working through this and sort of like really, like I said, we really went back to the drawing board. And then starting in June, we sort of like started to hone in on a reference implementation that we felt good about. And then from June until recent, like just the other day, we've been working on all of this verification and sort of correctness checking, and really, when it comes to formal verification, I'm not like the world expert or anything like that, but from what I've learned through this process is that a lot of the work is in specification. And so it's very similar, right? It's about specifying the behaviors and specifying the rules and saying this is exactly how it should work in every single sort of scenario. And then given that, does the actual solidity that we made, the bytecode that we made, does it match the specification? You know, and that part is actually fairly straightforward. The actual like verification part, fairly straightforward. All of the work and all of the trickiness, and you can see the same thing when you see like other critical systems design, like for instance spaceships and stuff like this. All of the work is in the specification of the behavior, which could not be done until after the implementation was done, because it's it's very much like a conversation between the people specifying and the people actually implementing, right? And so for the last 2 or 3 months, it's been that conversation back and forth, figuring out how can we land on a spec that we feel good about. And then at the end, there was just a very quick flurry of verification work. And now we feel really good about everything.
Yeah, it's incredible. I'm trying to wrap my head around the complexity involved with something like that. I don't think I can do it. So,
it's actually been more about simplicity, right? Because it's been a lot of cutting away the fat. I mean, we kind of have that. We like rock that aesthetic, right? That simplicity, sort of Zen rock garden aesthetic with all of these smart contracts. And so really, it's been about removing stuff and sort of there was this like whole inside joke of removing things from core, right? And it's like, that's not in core anymore. No, that's out of core. No, that's second layer system, right? And so many things that we think of as like basically like canonical white paper features are no longer in the core CDP engine. And the idea is that we can modularize everything and like move them out, right? And it's been all of this, like, if you look at the core CDP engine, it's really, really short, sweet, and to the point. It's very, very simple. So that's a lot of work. It's actually not a ton of complexity.
That's something
build up around this very simple system.
I think that's actually something that I saw you talk about on stage. One of those first talks that got me involved with Maker is you were talking about the Linux model of software design and creating components and dependencies as opposed to monolithic Solidity contracts that are sort of doomed to fail.
Yeah, way into that. Really what it boils down to is the CDP engine, the actual core CDP engine, does not make any calls to any other contracts. Everything calls into it, which is a very useful pattern when you're trying to make sure that there's no funny business. Because in the EVM, if you've got some code and then it makes a call and then it returns, now you don't know anything. Anything could be true. So it's very difficult to make some rules and stick to them if the code is calling outwards. And so the idea is that all of the work that we've been doing is trying to make it so that the core CDP logic never calls outwards. Things only call into it. And so there's no funny business in there.
It's amazing. So one of the things, I'm going to stop myself. Anybody who's in the chat, so we have a lot of people in today. Please feel free to type in a question and interrupt us at any time. We're here to answer questions. But until that happens, I'm just going to keep on monopolizing the conversation. So one of the things that's always fascinates me about designing a complex series of contracts is how to balance the code that you guys are writing against the introduction of new incentives that might not have been intended. Do you guys have this workflow where you get with the financial people or the game theory experts and sort of iterate on what these changes are going to do to the larger system, or do you save that for testing later?
Could you restate the question, sorry?
Sure. So MakerDAO is kind of a complex system in that, well, I shouldn't say complex because I get angry when other people say it's complex. It's a sophisticated system, and it's a grouping of balanced and competing and complementary incentives, and that sort of creates this whole system, this sort of symbiotic and reaches stasis. Mm-hmm. And when you guys are developing something like Multi-Collateral Dai, you're introducing new inputs, right? And how do you measure the impact that these decisions might have on competing incentives in other areas that you might not have intended? Like, do you guys map out sort of the game theory of the entire system?
Like, do we do game theoretic analysis?
Yeah.
No, we're not really game theory geniuses or anything like that. It's mostly like, the thing about game theory, which is something that's really underappreciated, it's very intuitive to people because it's how we've been sort of operating for millions of years and everything. So a lot of it is like, you just kind of can like look at it and see this is a bad idea or a good idea. But as far as like, to sort of speak to your point, people are always constantly suggesting like novel ways to do oracles and make sure that they don't misbehave, or novel ways to like have it so that the MKR holders like stake their MKR to like specific CDP types that they're quite confident about, or like novel ways to like, you know, have like decision making like with futarchy and all these different things, right? Like there's tons of different, what I would call like non-core sort of solutions to things, right? And they're very important, but they're very different from what we've been focusing on over the last like leg of development, because the last leg of development, it was sort of like a white box in terms of assuming all of the messiness of humans. You know what I mean? But that all exists. It's all very important. And my approach, my sort of opinion about how we should approach that stuff as a community, because really it's not about me, you know, or like the development team. It's about like how the maker holders introduce these like new tools. And so, in my opinion, what's most important is being able to create like small systems that are experimentative, and then seeing how it works in a small context, well, still a live production context, but a small live production context, and then letting it grow slowly over time. Because for two reasons. Number one, it allows you to try something with money on the line while reducing risk. And then the other reason is that sometimes something works quite well when it's small, but then as it grows bigger, it doesn't work at scale, right? And so if you just don't know that if you just launch at scale and then it doesn't work, you might not get a chance to have any sort of feedback and figure out what was wrong because it wasn't ever working. But if it's working when it's small and then it grows and then stops working, then you can learn from it, you know? So in general, like, I used to work at, back in the day, I used to work at AWS as a developer before I did Maker. And one of the things that I learned from working at a large company is like how much work, how much engineering work, organizational work, and just creativity goes into migrations and like migrating a running system from one thing to another, right? I talked to the proof of stake researchers at the Ethereum Foundation once, and they said that switching to proof of stake is like jumping from a galloping horse into a speeding convertible, you know? It's like it's very nerve-wracking, you know? And so it's the same thing for any change to Maker, right? It's like it's not something that you just want to like do for the hell of doing it, right? Like you got to be really, really careful because we've got something that's very important here, and a lot of people are like, you know, going to be relying on this thing, especially DAI users, you know? So in general, like I'm really, really, really coming to appreciate like slowness, upgrade paths, like putting a lot of effort onto this sort of stuff, and just making sure that we can be experimentative. Sort of similar to Steven's like composite risk model, where there's like different risk teams, they all sort of bubble up into one like risk model. I think it should be similar for any sort of fancy schmancy game theoretic systems that we try.
Yeah, I think that you made a lot of really good points, and I think that one of the key ones is when you said novel. I think that it's important for everybody in this space to kind of remember that we are testing things for the first time, and what might look good in a white paper may not actually look great, like a future key, or any one of the 50 different types of governance or voting mechanisms that arise every couple of weeks. These are all untested, and to like put all your eggs in that basket and hope that things work out well is risky, super risky.
Wow. So. And in fact, the governance system that we use right now is the only one that has years of proven track record, because it's how BitShares used to work, which, as some of you may know, Maker is a spinoff from the BitShares community. And so when we looked at governance, what we did is we said, okay, well, BitShares works, so we should just do that. And so that's kind of like, just goes to show that like, why mess with something that works, you know?
Yeah, precisely. This is something that happens in the IT world, sort of, it's endemic. We attempt to either reinvent the wheel, or we try to change the wheel because it's novel, and those are two dangerous things to do. Jordan has a question I'm going to read out. He asks, does this mean implementing what Maker voters want will take more time because each new implementation of the system will need additional attention?
Implementing what Maker holders want will take a long time no matter what, for a similar reason as what I was talking about before, which is that it needs to be done exceedingly carefully. But in general, the Maker holders have a ton more flexibility to want things now, right? Because we can even, like in this implementation that we have, we can even switch to a completely different CDP engine live in flight, and just like have a completely different like accounting system if we wanted to, you know? So there's like, yes, it's a lot of work, and something that we have to treat really, really carefully, but they can basically like, it's really like they have really like MKR can it's much more of like a choose your own adventure at this point, you know, in terms of like what kind of organization they want to create. You know what I mean? But yeah, it'll be a lot of work. But actually, we've grown a lot as developers over this last development leg, and so things like formal verification and sort of the design principles that we've adopted, we don't have to figure that out anymore. So in terms of designing stuff, you know, in some ways it'll take a long time, and in other ways it'll be very straightforward.
So I'm going to throw some random questions at you now. How complete is the package of contracts that have been released to Covan? Is this representative of the final picture of multi-collateral, or are there still code to come?
The main thing, so it's all modules based, right? The CDP engine, which is the core, and then there's lots and lots of modules. And so some of them will be very like straightforward and what you would expect in Canonical Maker. Like for instance, if you want to modify your CDP, there's obviously a module for that. The main one that does not yet exist, which is very important, is the cage module, which is for emergency shutdown. And so this module is, I believe, implemented, but it's still sort of like going back and forth, and also I don't believe it's verified at all. And so that's the next follow. I'd call it a fast follow, but smart contracts are pretty slow. But the next follow after this release will be the cage module, and then I would pretty much be comfortable saying that that's like the entirety of what Maker is. And then there's like many other systems, like for instance, the governance delay module, the Oracle security module, which was just released. And there's things like, you know, the ability to migrate from one CDP engine to another, which I just mentioned a few seconds ago. And then there's basically like lots and lots of, there's a very long tail of non-core sort of behavior. But in terms of like single collateral DAI and all of its features and like all of the things that you expect as Maker, the last thing that's really missing is the cage module.
Okay, interesting. You touched on something that we get a lot of questions about, and that's the migration path from single collateral to multi-collateral. Can you confirm for us that there is going to be some kind of an application or some kind of conversion migrator process? Or if you use the MKR redeemer functionality, like if you had old MKR and the new MKR, it'll be pretty much the same thing. And in fact, it's literally built off of the same code. But it's basically just like it's just a contract that the foundation can dump multi-collateral DAI into, and then it redeems one-to-one on a website. So if you have old single collateral DAI, you can just redeem. And then we'll take the single collateral DAI and then just use it to like wind down the system and migrate CDPs over. And so it'll be like a somewhat slow process. But for a DAI holder, it's very simple, one-click holder. Basically, you'll have to get some single collateral DAI yourself, and then wipe your debt, and then migrate your stuff over. Yeah, that's interesting. I forgot that there's two different kinds of DAI, and we can't just arbitrarily make or delete DAI, so there has to be a fairly logical migration process there.
Yeah, but since single collateral DAI is backed by ETH, and really it's just like, because it's only one collateral type, single collateral DAI and ETH are really, really closely related, you know? We can actually use single collateral DAI as collateral in multi-collateral DAI, since it's really just like ETH at the end of the day. And so if we need to, we can sort of, like multi-collateral DAI can sort of like subsume single collateral DAI and like suck it up inside of it by using it as a collateral type. But we'll only do that if we need to.
Oh, wow. That's a bit mind-blowing. All right, David, do you have access to a mic? Do you want to read out your question, or should I?
Yeah, I can read out. I can read it out.
Okay.
So my question was, using CLI on Kovan for the core CDP engine is awesome, and it's for me it might take a little while to actually get everything running. But I was curious about the upcoming redesign of the DAI dashboard, and if that's going to come out so that more novice users can play around with multi-collateral DAI on Kovan.
Yeah, I think that the DAI dashboard is. Okay, so this is a good question, and I sort of owe you the proper answer because it's one of two things, and I'm not exactly sure which one. It's either A, the new dashboard will be released when Collateral Dai's production release, that it's all bundled together as like an awesome update, or B, it will be released beforehand since it's like pretty much done right now, and there's no sense in not getting it in front of people. Or it might be C, where there's like a beta or like a small test version that's released that community members can use, but it's not necessarily ready for prime time. So one of those three things is true, and at various points, all of those things have been true. But I have to check where we're at right now in terms of like the schedule, and I'll get back to you on that. But we do have like a badass new dashboard that is pretty much almost ready, and they've been working on it for a while.
It is an amazing dashboard. It'd be with the way that launch dates are lining up, it would be kind of a disappointment not to release it first for single collateral, but who knows how it's going to shake out. Yeah. Mariano, you had a question. Did you want to ask that on mic, or should I read it out? I'll read it. All right. So besides the audits and formal verification, is there any other ultimate security layer that can be added to the code? So what else do you guys think about when it comes to securing the contracts?
It depends what you call it security, right? Because like, for instance, the global settlement, like the settlers, are like a form of security. I think of them as bank guards, actually. And then there's also like things like the Oracle security module, which prevents against the oracles doing a price feed attack. There's also a governance delay module, which prevents against the MKR holders from doing a governance attack. And so really it just gets down to how you define security, right? You could even say the intelligence of the MKR holders is an ultimate security layer in the sense that they wouldn't do anything stupid or be tricked into buying magic beans, you know what I mean? But as far as the actual code and like making sure that there's rules that are adhered to in the actual EVM code, they call it formal verification for a reason, right? It's very formal. There's not much more that we need to do after that point. We can sort of have the specification peer reviewed, and that's part of the reason that we released it in public. But as long as the people agree that the specification is correct and correctly describes Maker, then either the bytecode adheres to it or it doesn't.
It's interesting. So I mistakenly assumed that a formal verification was sort of self-evidently correct or incorrect, but I guess somebody has to go through and validate the spec.
Yeah, I mean, you could say that like if you made your spec like wrong or maliciously, and then you could say yes, the bytecode adheres to the spec, but then the spec says, like I can take all of the collateral for myself or something, then it doesn't matter if it adheres to it. You just got to make sure that the spec is of high and honest quality.
All right, cool. So Jordan Crandall has another question. Aren't there a lot of risks to all the CDP holders needing to buy back single collateral DAI?
Well, the thing is that we're going to have a lot of single collateral DAI as the DAI Foundation, because all of the single collateral DAI holders are going to be basically just giving it to us to get multi-collateral DAI. So if anybody needs single collateral DAI, we want to make it's just very straightforward. It's not like a thing where you like speculate anymore or anything like that. It's just kind of more like a well-ordered exit from the auditorium. You know what I mean?
Sure. All right. He has a follow-up question down lower. Interesting about it being used as collateral, but it seems like a hard puzzle to fit together to get all the single collateral DAI back to the CDPs. Yeah, it's annoying. But, I mean, basically, like, anybody who's opening a CDP should be, at this point, they're a pretty sophisticated user. And so if it comes down to us having to do it on like a point-by-point basis, we'll just figure it out, Because is sophisticated user code already used to being annoyed, I guess?
What do you think?
Sophisticated user is code for used to being annoyed by us already, if they're using that tool?
Maybe, yeah. Yeah. They did have to click like 15 times to open it.
I think people have mentioned that online a few times. You're right about that. James, you had a question. Do you want to read that out, or do you want me to read it for you?
Is my mic working?
Yeah.
The question is, can you update us on the status or future of the TRFM? So the TRFM was sort of similar to what Rich was talking about, where we thought that we had this like algorithm that could, like just work in all cases, but it was very much a bad idea. And the fact that we abandoned it really is a testament to not getting attached to bad ideas. So the actual TRFM, which was like basically just like a dumb controller, is probably never going to come back because it was just a bad idea. Now, as far as like adjusting the target price of Dai, definitely not ruling that out. And that's really again, it's something that the MKR holders will have to decide to do. And they may very well decide to do that. Now, the Dai savings rate, is that what it's called these days? The reward rate or the savings, whatever, you know what I mean. The
savings rate, yeah, that's the new name.
The Dai savings rate was created as a way to not have to adjust the target price of Dai, because adjusting the target price of Dai is very confusing, we've found, when talking to people about the system, right? Because it's like your debt is changing, but your nominal debt units aren't changing. And so it's very confusing, in the same way that macroeconomics is confusing to people. And so given that, the hope is that with the Dai savings rate and also the base rate on the CDP side, which is basically like the ability to control every single CDP's stability fee at once. Given that we have these two things, the hope is that we won't need to adjust the target price of Dai. But again, like I said, if we have to, we can. And if we have to do it according to some sort of algorithm, we can do that too. It's just the TRFM wasn't very sophisticated. You know what I mean? But I should say that what we're creating right now is like a research group that's going to be studying this question and many more, which is like, how do we stabilize Dai using rates?
Interesting. All right, cool. Andrew Bourbon has a question, and it's worth actually reiterating this. So he asks, or he states, so to be clear, if I have an open CDP, I need to wipe my debt first to move over to multi-collateral Dai.
Move the collateral over?
Yeah, so to convert a single collateral Dai CDP into a multi-collateral CDP, can you just outline what the steps would be there? So it's absolutely crystal clear for people.
I mean, it's sort of a developing story, but the basic gist of it is going to be that, yeah, like you or somebody else who's like a service provider will have to wipe the debt, move the collateral over, open a new CDP, and then issue the same amount of debt, right? So if it's you, that assumes that you have like money on the side with which you can manage this position. Basically, you didn't make a position that was too big. But if your position is too big, then we have to basically figure out a way that there's this thing called like a snapshot loan, where inside of one transaction, somebody can like give you the coins that you, like basically somebody can give you all the Dai, the single collateral Dai that you need, wipe your debt with it, move your collateral over to a whole bunch of multi-collateral Dai, and then keep it. And so it's basically like they like move everything over for you, and then they have possession of the single and multi-collateral Dai at the beginning and end of the transaction. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? So we can do something like this, but it's like an unimplemented system right now, and it's basically just like a service. And part of the reason that we're leaving single collateral Dai up for a long time is that way if people are kind of stuck in their position, we can come up with something like this. But it's not done yet because it's just really an issue of prioritization more than anything else.
All right, so yeah, it's good to clarify though that we've made a commitment, I think publicly more than a few times, that the single collateral Dai CDPs will be active for at least 6 months after the launch of multi-collateral. So there isn't going to be a hard requirement for people to shut down and migrate immediately. And so, Andy, what you're saying is that we'll potentially come up with a solution, or we're working on a solution, and there's also an opportunity for the third-party market to come up with a solution as well.
Yeah, I mean, like, really what it boils down to is if people need it, then we'll figure it out. But if everybody was just responsible and didn't make positions that were too big, then maybe we won't need it. So it's really just like, it's just a question of like, we'll respond to whatever our customers need.
All right. Bamsi, you have a question. Did you want to ask that yourself, or do you want me to ask that for you?
Yeah, I can ask that. So in a way, like I think it'll be really nice for maker holders like to start sharing some of the risk. like off liquidations. But the PET mechanism was still like really useful in that maker holders like could offload some of the burden to the remaining CDP holders of that type. Would something like that be implementable again, or is it always going to be like maker holders share like shouldering the risk of all collateral types?
I think that it should be the MKR holders, but I'm not sure if they can do a thing like PEF because they're basically there's like a really, really specific technical question that gets into the code, which I don't have like perfectly committed to memory in this case, but I think it is technically possible to do a thing like PEF because there's like basically once all of the gems, or sorry, once all of the collateral has been pooled, then you can change the basically like the exchange rate from gems to collateral, which would be similar to basically what PEF does. But it's a question of, can you do it per ilk, which is the CDP type? Sorry, I loathe jargon, but I have to think out loud right now. And so given, I don't know if you can do it per CDP type, which would be a lot more sort of relevant for creating a PEF type mechanism. So it's kind of like, I'd have to think about it. But in general, my instinct is that I don't really want to do it. So
I think this is something that we've spoken
It's
about.
a fair answer. Yeah.
In the governance call with the risk team. And I think that the general consensus is that we really, really don't want to create tiers or tranches of maker holders. It's the responsibility of maker holders to sort of assume the stewardship of the entire ecosystem. And if we have tranches of maker holders, then we could potentially set up antagonistic relationships between one CDP type and another, which might be a bit risky.
Exactly. That's the main thing that makes me nervous.
All right, James, you want to? Oh, actually, James just asked a question. There are about a side project that might handle CDP migrations. We've already seen a few projects that are getting very close. We have the CDP automatic liquidator. We have CDP insurance mechanisms that people are working on that handle the ownership and recovery of at-risk CDP. So I think that there's a lot of activity in the space already towards managing CDP. So it's entirely possible somebody's going to get there before we do, which is interesting.
I would way prefer that, actually.
Yeah, I think that I'm constantly kind of surprised because there's this opportunity for a fairly lucrative aftermarket when it comes to managing and insuring and securing and offering up for sale CDPs. I'm hoping that somebody gets there very soon. Justin Green asks, are there plans to add more coins to Oasis decks? That's a little off topic here. I don't know if we have anybody from Oasis decks who can answer that question for you, Justin, unfortunately.
There's plans to decentralize Oasis decks and make it so that anybody can add any coins that they want.
No, really? Do we have a loose timeline on that, or is that just sometime in the future?
There's no loose timeline, but it is the agenda.
I'm glad we got that on tape. That's the sigh you hear when you ask an IT person for a loose timeline. All right. Let's see. What do we have? I think that James says there's a second part to that question that I haven't figured out yet, Justin. James, can you clear up what you mean by it's not off topic?
Oh, sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
It was just that he asked about coins being added to Oasis decks, specifically the ones that we're doing as secondary collateral types or as extra collateral types.
Oh, yeah, good point. I completely zoned out on the second part of that question. So yeah, that is an interesting question. It seems like it makes sense.
It'll just be any coins that you can trade eventually. The idea is that, I mean, Oasis was always meant to be a decentralized exchange, right? So screw the maker holders, just let everybody trade.
And we did have that before. Anybody
could trade anything.
Trade any coin.
Those were the good old days.
All right, it seems like the questions might be winding down a bit. Oh, there's one more. I can always count on Jordan Crandall. All right. I like tranches that have some but not all responsibility, just so we can give maker holders more opportunity to give individual input and access to risk and reward. But yeah, I do already know that, Rich. Ha. So it's a really large discussion, and Jordan, I hope that you come to the meeting on Thursday, because it's something we still need to talk about. And I know that there's other people in the community that are very interested in finding ways to incentivize maker holders to take more responsibility for their decisions. But Andy kind of touched on that earlier. It's that it gets very complex very quickly, and we can.
I'm not against it. I mean, as far as like, I think it might be you, Jordan, in the. Or no, it's the dude. Hodl down.
Yeah, he's a big fan of the idea.
He's really into this, and his idea, I don't think it's a bad idea. It just makes me nervous, and so I'd want to do it really, really slowly and small, and just kind of experiment with it, especially as like a second layer thing, you know, because you can sort of think of it as like not core, basically something. I don't know if it specifically needs special privileges into Maker to work, or if you could just make it as a completely independent system that just like auto participates in auctions and things like this. And so, yeah, we just have to think about it a little bit more, because in general, like making more granular risk reward is good intuitively, but keeping the maker holders all on the same page is for sure more important.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I'm glad you raised that. That in those discussions on Reddit, we sort of, I think there was a consensus that second layer might be a really good place to put this stuff. But we should definitely bring this back up in the governance meeting, because the risk team needs to publicly address it.
It'll be a long time from now before we do anything like that. And also it'll be a long time from now before we need to do anything like that, because we don't have very diverse ecosystem of tokens yet, or like asset types.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that we talk about that are going to be in next year or the year after, like synthetic Dai or yen Dais and all kinds of things. So, all right, we're coming up to the end of the hour. I think that's
fast.
It might be time to wind things down a bit. I want to thank everybody for the furious amount of questions. That was genius. Thank you, Andy, for taking time out of your schedule for releasing code to start talking about code for a while. Appreciate it. Thanks, Jocelyn, for saying that was great.
I'll try to make it to more of these in the future.
Yeah, I'd love to have you back. Actually, I'm just going to make that into a commitment, and we'll assume you're going to do that.
Great.
I'll give you a loose timeline on when we're going to need you. How's that?
Okay, great. I'll sigh longingly into the window when you tell me about it.
Okay. Thanks everybody for joining us. Thanks, Jocelyn. Thanks, Jess. I'll talk to you guys later.
Peace, y'all.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Later, guys.